Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to wait about 1 minute before we get started here to let people jump into the webinar. Just as a reminder, today will be recorded, so this will be sent out in a couple of days to everybody who attended today. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I am going to send this over to Karina for the introductions and the rest of the presentation.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. I'm Karina Akidal, Managing Editor of Canadian Auto Dealer, and welcome to our four-part webinar series, Steady at the Wheel, Leading Your Dealership Through Business Recovery. This is the second webinar of our four-part series. Today's webinar is in two parts with two different speakers. So we've kind of flipped that around now. In part one, we'll be hearing from Eugene Ng from MNP. He'll be presenting on the real risks of cybercrime for your dealership. In part two, David Kane, president of Kane Automotive, who is an invited guest of NCM Associates, will present on building your digital presence. So it's no surprise that digital is a hot topic today, as having a digital presence is arguably one of the most important things you can do for your business amid COVID-19. Cybersecurity has not yet garnered the same hot spot as digital within auto retail, even as cyber threats and attacks have increased since the pandemic and with the rise of remote working, For this reason, you may find the topic of cybercrime particularly interesting, considering how these threats could impact your dealership. But before I throw it over to today's presenters, there are just a few housekeeping items. First, today's webinar will be recorded. So if you need to step out for a bit, we will be sending the recording out shortly after the webinar concludes. Next, we will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the webinar. You can submit your questions at any time by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. If you can't see it right now, you can move your mouse to the bottom of the screen and it should appear then. Enter your questions there and I'll do my best to ask them to our experts at the end of the webinar. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Eugene Ng, who is a partner at MNP and works in the cybersecurity department. He's based in Mississauga, Ontario. Eugene will discuss social engineering and how these attacks can affect your business. He will also discuss current developments, future issues, and evolving risks arising from digital trends that can impact your dealership. So with that, Eugene, I'm going to pass this over to you now.
Great, thanks, Karina. I'll just make sure everybody can hear me okay. Perfect. All right, let's get started. So just a quick little introduction. Like Karina mentioned, my name is Eugene. I'm part of the Tech Solutions group within MNP. I focus primarily in my time under the cybersecurity and privacy umbrella. And basically, we do a bunch of stuff around cybersecurity. We do some strategy and governance work for organizations, risk management, privacy and data protection. We have a 7x24 managed security SOC. We do offensive security penetration testing, and also 7x24 incident response and management. Work in a bunch of different verticals, and here to talk to you today a little bit about social engineering. Really quickly, this is the agenda for kind of my next 15 to 20 minutes. We'll talk a little bit about the types of attacks that we're seeing within your industry. I'll talk a little bit about why cybersecurity has kind of elevated to, or should be elevated to the top of your list when it comes to business risks to deal with. And then we've got some examples of some of the new types of social engineering attacks using synthetic voice, deep fakes, and combine that with the existing tactics of social engineering and phishing. And then we got a fun little video about what burritos can teach us about cybersecurity. So hopefully we won't bore you too much with the cyber topic, but we'll kind of get right into it. So the state of the nation, just a few little cyber stats. No presentation is really complete without some statistics. So what we're finding today is organizations are being targeted quite often and in tremendous volumes with social engineering and phishing attacks. Spear phishing specifically, we see almost 90% of organizations deal with those types of attacks on a regular basis. The users of end-use computing devices like mobile phones, 10% of them don't actually use any security whatsoever, so no PIN code or other security measures on their device itself. Only 30% of end users understand what smishing is, or SMS phishing, when you get those links sent to you through text messages. And then specifically within the auto dealership arena, a study that was completed last year in the US, 200 car dealerships, 84% of consumers would not buy a car from an auto dealership that experienced a data security breach. And what's interesting too, in a similar study, is 70% of automotive dealerships do invest in cyber. So this would be, firewalls, IT technology, endpoint, data protection. But more than 60% of you that do invest in cybersecurity don't conduct regular security assessments, and we'll talk about why that should change. So as I mentioned in the opening slide, just the tremendous volume of spear phishing attacks. You can see that. Also, the volume of business email compromise attacks have increased substantially over the past few years. We've got some examples of business email compromise, but essentially that's when somebody is attempting to spoof or impersonate an individual, either one of your customers or suppliers, and ask one of your financial folks to make a fraudulent transfer. And when we talk about the year-over-year increase within the automotive sector specifically, you would have seen the fourth highest year-over-year increase in the frequency of attacks using spoofing as a tactic. And this is, again, trying to trick an individual, either the to field or the from field, to mimic or spoof another individual. It could also be cyber squatting. So registering domain names that are similar to the organization. So instead of an I, they'll use an L and try to mimic the domain that way. Now, as far as why this should matter to you, there's a few kind of up and coming trends within cybersecurity. The first is really around the privacy legislation. PIPEDA, as of November 2018, almost all organizations are subject to PIPEDA, and this essentially has to do with personally identifiable information, and a breach must be disclosed if there's a real risk of significant harm. The definition of real risk of significant harm includes sensitivity of personal information involved in the breach of security safeguards, and the probability that the personal information has been, is, or will be misused. If you're interested, on the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, the OPC, there is a self-assessment tool for you as an organization to kind of help you identify where the crown jewels of PII live within your organization, just to kind of get your ducks in a row as far as where to focus the majority of your time when you want to secure your clients' data. And when it comes to automotive dealerships, I recently spoke to a cyber insurer and why your premiums are typically higher than most other organizations and why you remain an elevated target. I've kind of summarized the conversation here in a PowerPoint slide, but really, most automotive dealerships are considered to be small businesses. And again, based on the statistics, you're likely to be hit with email threats. Those of you that deal with used cars, you guys are at even more risk for fraud and cyber attacks due to the fragmented nature of extending credit to your particular customers. In addition, you hold a tremendous amount of information on your clients, This could be due to the fact of warranty claims, marketing activities, service and maintenance. You've got a tremendous amount of PII information that criminals would love to target. Another reason is just the mix and match of different brands within some of the larger dealership groups that are out there. You know, almost every OEM has a different portal management system, ordering system, and you've got multiple credentials and multiple sets of information being stored and housed in those data warehouses. And like I mentioned earlier, the majority of you do not perform cyber assessments, so you really don't know how secure your organization actually is. And finally, again, talking with the cyber insurer, they mentioned that most dealership groups don't have a formal cyber awareness plan, and some of the fraud controls are actually substandard when compared to other industries. So when we talk about social engineering, and this should be really no surprise, and don't worry, I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on email phishing, but when we talk about the imposter and the spoofing emails, the majority of the subject lines that appear over 50% of the time are either payment, request, or urgent. And this is really around the business email compromise or trying to get individuals to send fraudulent payments to various bank accounts. So these are just some examples here. All right, Eugene, so we've kind of gone over the historical facts. I don't think anything that I've shown you so far is that earth-shattering. So what's actually new? So what's new is the fact that voice is becoming very pervasive when we talk about moving your organization to kind of the next online and digital platform. And I chuckle because initially my slide said voice is persuasive, and it is also persuasive because a lot of people will do things over the phone or over video calls just because of the sound of somebody's voice. And we're seeing this voice pervasiveness really happen with the smart speakers that most of us will have at home. And you can see the statistics here. 5.8 million of us in Canada will use our smart speaker at least once per month. And that's a 51% increase from 2018. In fact, some banks like Desjardins now allow users to check bank balances and pay Visa statements through just the use of your voice. And by 2020, the end of this year, almost 20% of the Canadian population will use a smart speaker at least once per month. Now, what happens when we continue to rely upon voice, and why is voice becoming more pervasive? Well, one is it's easy to use. You know, the light touch of implementing technology is great for end users. And so what we're starting to see is that voice fraud attacks are starting to emerge. And really combined with the voice fraud attacks, and we'll show you some examples of that in a second, combine that with data breaches. So these would be breaches like things like LinkedIn or the Yahoo breach, where threat actors are stealing usernames and passwords. Combine that with voice fraud, you're starting to see a tremendous amount of fraud occur. And what this is leading to is this concept of synthetic identity theft. And really, synthetic identity occurs when threat actors create new identities by combining fabricated and sometimes real personal data, such as birth dates, social security numbers. And what they do is the attackers will then obtain credit under the new identity, which they'll run up the charges on the bills and then skip out on them, of course. And synthetic identity is now the fastest growing financial crime in the United States. And then we've also seen money mule accounts. So if you are familiar with the business email compromise attacks, where they'll be sending it to different bank accounts, this is how those money mules accounts are created. I was recently down in, not recently, sorry, 6 months ago before everything happened with the pandemic. I was down at the first and last security conference down in San Francisco. And this is from a vendor called Pindrop. And what the graph is actually showing is the total number of fraudulent voice calls, along with the total loss when we talk about financial loss. And so you can see here that the rates have climbed more than 350% from 2014 to 2018. And some of the high headlines that you'll see these days is no longer just about business email compromise, but we can see here a voice deepfake was used to scam a CEO out of $243,000. And some of the voice synthesizers that are out there and some of the deepfake generators, you can actually create a synthetic voice with just 2 hours of recording. So if you have 2 hours worth of recording of somebody's voice, or if your president's on YouTube, or they're doing a lot of different auto commercials, let's say on the radio, it is definitely possible to synthesize and create a fake voice. So how do we actually, or how do the attackers actually use these different ways to perform voice fraud? So the first thing that most of the attackers will want to do, like I mentioned before, is stolen credentials. So we want to try to see what we can find out on the dark web. And then the attackers will also try to get access to some of the answers to the secret questions, you know, your birthday, your mother's maiden name. And finally, to leverage some sort of voice artificial intelligence generator or voice deception software. And so I'll kind of walk you through the different steps here to kind of create an example of how the attacks actually occur. And keep in mind too, the attackers can also leverage other tools and tricks to perpetrate this fraud. One, of course, that you may have heard before is phone number spoofing. So they'll change the source of the phone ID, caller ID when it comes in. Maybe it'll come from the bank or from a credit provider. I'm sure you've also seen some of the news articles on SIM card swapping, where they'll actually transfer a user's cell phone number over to a new SIM device. You layer on top of this email phishing, SMS phishing or smishing, and now you've kind of got a holistic attack pattern to target an organization. So the first thing, like I mentioned, is stealing credentials. I use the term loosely because it's really not that, you don't really have to steal credentials anymore. What I did, for those of you that are listening on this call, is I actually researched all the attendees' email addresses. I basically put them into a dark web search engine, and I pulled out some of your passwords for various websites that have had breaches in the past. So you can see here, some are from MyFitnessPal, from LinkedIn, Fun Office Pool. So if you recognize any of these passwords, and I've starred them out just to make sure no one gets upset from a privacy perspective, you'll recognize that some of these are freely searchable on the dark web. And when we talk about password reuse, this is an example of one registrant on this call. The password is the same from 2017 to 2018 to 2019, and it looks like finally in 2020, the pattern of 1PN has finally changed. So this is some of the real challenges that we're dealing with from a cybersecurity perspective. Now I'm gonna pause here and do a quick little audience poll. So I mentioned that I had put everyone's email address in and did a quick little search. What percentage of webinar registrants had credentials available on the dark web? 5, 10, 15, or over 20%? Do we have the answers in? All right, so nobody thought it was less than 5%, which is good. 10, 15, 20 plus. All right, well, you guys are definitely paying attention. And the answer is almost 27% of you had credentials available on the dark web. Now, again, this is not necessarily an issue with your own cyber hygiene. It's just a matter of, you know, why you shouldn't reuse passwords and where attackers can gather these credentials from. So if we kind of go back to the different steps that are required after the attacker has stolen credentials, and these can be used, if you recall the CRA incident on the Serve benefit just, I don't know, maybe 4 weeks ago, that was an attack using credential stuffing. So they'll take existing credentials and try to access an organization's web portal using those same credentials. So the next step is to try to get some SQL questions, and this could be in the call center. And what I did here is I just picked out something through Facebook where people put up these polls to say, what's your creative spirit name? So take the month that you were born, plus take the day you were born. And of course, people are more than happy to share with everyone the day that they were born. Now, of course, when we talk about mother's maiden name, same kind of idea. You can find all this information on a bunch of different social media networks. So here's someone here that says, my maiden name is O'Leary. There's her mom's maiden name. She's laughing about it, that her maiden name of Reed is also on the list. So again, attackers can comb people's social media profiles to get this information, I guess not so secret questions. And then finally, when we talk about voice deception, you know, how hard could it really be? So after I got back from the security conference, I decided to test it out. So the first thing I did is I signed up for a voice over IP provider. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Skype. So I signed up for a paid trial. I downloaded a synthetic voice generator. This one here is just called Screaming Bee. You can see here on the screenshot that you can put different background effects. You can play gunshots, you can play a laugh, you can pretend that you're in a shopping mall. So I downloaded that. You'll also notice on the left-hand side, you can either be a child, a man, a woman, a robot, a dog. I got my New Jersey phone number, and I recorded my audio, and I'll just play you my quick little test here.
Hello, how are you? Can you pick up some milk?
So I just tested that, make sure it's working okay. And then I love to leverage my wife in my presentations. And so I decided I would call her, and I'm going to give you just a quick little recording of the conversation that we had together. Just a couple of notes before we play the recording. We are still married, if you're wondering after the voice recording. And the Erin Advocate is actually a local newspaper to where we live. Okay, and I'll go ahead and play this now.
Hello.
Oh, hi, is this Drew Daigle?
Yes, it is.
Hi, my name is Amanda, and I'm calling from the Erin Advocate. We've had an IT issue and lost all of our subscribers' credit card information. We just have the last 4 digits.
Okay.
We're just trying to update our files. Would you be able to give me your updated credit card info?
I don't really feel comfortable doing that over the phone. Just because of all the stuff that's going on right now with like phone scams and stuff like that. Is there another way that I can get that information to you?
Completely understand. You know what, Drew Daigle? This is Eugene Ng. This was just testing you. What do you think? Hello?
I don't like you as a girl.
You did really well. Really good.
That's part of my presentation. I don't want to talk to you like this.
So I had to cut the recording off there, but you kind of get the understand if you have ever played a practical joke on your significant other. Now, we take the synthetic voice attacks, you know, the voice AI generators, and then we also talk about just the concept of deception can be quite funny, but it prepares us for kind of what's next when we talk about social engineering. So I'll play a quick little video here of some fake news.
Is driving the internet crazy.
Starting with Justin Bieber.
This is how he eats a burrito.
JB
chowing down on a burrito like it's a corn cob.
He's eating a burrito like he's eating corn in the cob.
And it's almost like he's eating it like a cob of corn.
You don't eat raw chicken, and you don't eat a burrito like that.
Compromising its structure by attacking. And if you're not offended, you're not American.
Exactly. Hold it like so that you.
Maybe from under. Yeah, like cradle it.
Exactly.
That is so freaking funny. Dude, yes.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That photo of Justin Bieber eating a burrito sideways was completely staged, and we are the ones that did it.
So brought to us by the famous Yes Theory group. Again, just a concept of kind of how easy it is to create these deception and fake videos. And the last thing that I'll leave you with is this deep fake created from Mark Zuckerberg, who I'm sure you all know, the founder of Facebook. And again, all you need is about 5 minutes of a person's audio. What's interesting is if you have 5 hours or more of audio, it's actually not perceptible by humans that it's a synthesized voice. And if you have 20 hours or more of audio, even the AI systems that are designed to fight the fraudulent activity makes it very difficult to determine if it's a fraud. So what you'll see here is just a deep fake video. You may have seen others inserting specific actors or actresses in kind of key movie scenes, but this is of course not Mark Zuckerberg talking. It's actually an AI generated video where an actor is actually reading the words from a script provided by Daniel Howe, I believe. So I'll just play this for you quickly.
Imagine this for a second. One man with total control of billions of people's stolen data, all their secrets, their lives, their futures. I owe it all to Spectre. Spectre showed me that whoever controls the data controls the future.
So thanks for your time today. I'll just kind of give you a few takeaways. Like Karita mentioned, with remote workforces, contactless purchasing, internet sales, definitely going to get worse, not just in your lines of business, but for everybody. Synthetic voice attacks combined with other social engineering mechanisms will be extremely difficult to prevent. So we're going to start seeing these attacks take off very quickly. When we talk about how to combat this stuff, I mean, yes, certainly education, awareness is key, but you can also implement some really low-cost fraud controls, authorizations, specific processes to cut down on unauthorized money transfers. It's key that your clients and the public do care about how you treat their information. And if you are concerned or you want to have a second look, you should consider having your security posture assessed. And with that, thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand it back over to Karina.
Thanks, Eugene. I think you've given us all a lot to think about there. Just a reminder to the audience, you can ask questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And if you can't find it for some reason, just move your mouse to the bottom and it should pop up. So next up is David Kane. David is the president of Kane Automotive, an industry-leading provider of automotive internet sales, fixed ops, business development center, and digital marketing training and consulting. Kane Automotive was founded in 2003 to teach dealers how to successfully market and sell vehicles online. David enjoys speaking at various industry events in the US, Canada, and abroad, as well as hosting his weekly online program, Kane & Company, on cbtnews.com. David is based in Oakland, California. And with that, David, I'll pass this over to you.
Well, Karina, thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate that. I have to cancel my presentation because Eugene has scared me effectively, and I'm going to go ahead and address with my cyber concerns and get back with you all later. But truly, it is really alarming when you see what he's done, and I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I definitely am changing my passwords considerably. So thank you very much for putting a little jolt in our day today, Eugene. That was really excellent. So dealer leadership in the digital age really is broader than just what we think about with respect to shopping online. We'll click through and talk about the digital marketplace overview and some opportunities that are available for your dealership in the marketplace. And ultimately come to the realization that here we are starting the year 2020 out. Everybody's optimistic. You compare 2020 to vision and you say, wow, we've got a really clear view of what the 2020 marketplace is going to be like. And then all of a sudden, this big wrecking ball of COVID-19 shows up. And we are now in a position to where people are starting to describe calamities as, well, I hope 2020 doesn't break out. So digital transformation, according to this cartoon, is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon. And as Eugene pointed out, remote workforces became the order of the day in March and April. Consumers not wanting to come to dealerships to transact, or perhaps not even being able to come to dealerships to transact. And dealers who were very confident in taking care of a guest who physically came to the dealership all found themselves in a position where they had to do remote sessions, do a lot of telephone consideration, but it really sped up the rate of digital retailing dramatically, and the consumers enjoyed it, the manufacturers enjoyed it, and had enough time elapsed during this, I think anyone who is entering the marketplace for a vehicle would start saying, this is exactly how I want to buy a car in the future. So we know that doing research online is just the norm, with 95% of car buyers doing this before they even buy a vehicle. And the modern buyer's journey starts with the thought that I want to buy a new vehicle, and they go online, they might do a Google or a Yahoo or a Bing search. They'll go to the manufacturer's website, check out the reviews, not only of the dealership, but also the employees. Get pricing information, get financing information, get trade-in information, maybe go to Car Gurus or Kijiji and learn a little bit more about the products or the pricing. Then YouTube is very prevalent in the shopping process, researching, watching vehicles, even to the point to where we use Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all kinds of sources to really bring our friends into the conversation, all before it ends up coming into the dealership. The average consumer, according to Cox Automotive, has spent on average 13.5 hours online, and typically that's all done on a mobile device. So it's not like they're using a big 26-inch screen or computer on their lap. They typically are doing it on a smartphone and gathering information that way, watching videos and getting acclimated not only to the vehicle, but also to you and the dealership. And 71% of them are using their phone at some point during the process. And what we found is consumers who are using the telephone are more likely to buy within the first 24 hours after they submit a request. And additionally, with geofencing, we're able to identify that a large percentage of them are actually on our lot or have just left our lot, and they're continuing the Q&A with the dealership right from their smartphone in close proximity to the dealership. So consumers love mobile, and dealers are in a position to where when it comes to designing their website and their digital retailing platform, they need to really consider designing it mobile first to make it real logical and easy for the consumer to be able to do that. And I don't know about you all, but during the COVID-19 crisis, I've been to the grocery store very few times, but I've found that I'm hyper dependent on going online and buying groceries, navigating grocery aisles and gathering up items into my cart, all things that I wouldn't have ever considered previously. And what we're finding is consumers, now that that's becoming more and more natural, are going to have a higher expectation that in the dealerships they run into the exact same thing and are able to leverage their mobile devices to do just that. So what does today's shopper want? Well, it's the same thing everybody on this call wants. We want to have our time respected. We want transparency, because online all I have to do is to type in something and I expect that I'm going to get the transparency of my question, all working towards putting those two together to build trust. And not surprisingly, in all markets, not just the US or Canada, you see a large population of buyers who simply do not trust automobile salespeople. And so time respecting and providing the transparency through the online environment tends to really enhance that. So we're starting to see dealerships that embrace digital retailing and information sharing are really upping their game when it comes to building trust with the consumer. Now, as I mentioned earlier, new habits are starting to be formed. According to a Google consumer survey done in April, 40% of Canadians are expecting to do more online shopping than they did before COVID. That's a big increase, and when you think in terms of their expectations, what we tout in our company is experience is the new brand. So the experience that the guest receives in the online environment really is what their indication of the physical environment is going to be. So we've got to pay close attention to what that experience is on our mobile platforms, regardless of where they find us, on search, on Google My Business, on your own website, or even the manufacturer's website or third-party sites. Consumers have a high expectation that it's going to be simple, clean, and easy as they go through the buying process. So one of the best ways that we find to equip your dealership to understand today's modern consumer is to just commission some digital field trips. So imagine up on a big screen in a meeting room with the dealership team, all members properly social distanced, going online and literally shopping for a vehicle. See what it's like for the consumer. Start with Google, type in what you're interested in based on your brand, and see where it takes you. And what's so remarkable is we're going to see things we never expected to see. We get really comfortable with our manufacturer's website, autotrader.ca. Perhaps we get comfortable with our own website and the details in there. But your consumer, literally when they're going through Google, they just click on the words, and next thing you know, they're in some unique environment. And like the gentleman in the picture, they start to get really confused. I'm getting advice here that's contradictory to the information on the other website. This one says they're the trusted source. The other one says they're product intelligence. What's the consumer to understand? So what we want to do is to recognize that what the field trip will do online is literally open your team's mind and give them some empathy for the guest. Every guest has a unique story to tell, or every website has a unique story to tell your guest. And what we want to do is be able to say to anyone who's shopping online, understand how you feel. I appreciate that you've been to all those websites. Why don't we go online together and let's just validate the information. And when we do what we call co-navigating, literally looking at the screen at the same time the consumer is on the screen, it really builds good trust and transparency. So as a result, we're really recommending dealerships start utilizing shared screen technology, much like what you see this broadcast on, so that you literally are in a situation to where you and the guest are on the same page, and you can even navigate on their behalf. Show them your vehicle, talk about the incentives, go into the financing details, and really build the entire deal. And that virtual appointment is becoming more and more commonplace as consumers find the opportunity to gather information before they even go into the dealership. So how do buyers in Canada reach out to dealerships nowadays? Well, what we're starting to see is a declining trend in walk-in and online form submissions in favor of them calling the dealership and having email interaction through leads. But through COVID, we saw a real ramp up of texting and online chat. And in fact, Google suggests that online chat and online messaging is going to become the preeminent communications form into dealerships in the future, and in fact into all businesses. So heretofore, most of our clients have used our advice, which was if you don't have anybody who can full-time manage chat in a live setting, it's best to use a third party to interact and then generate the lead. But what we're finding through COVID is it's way smarter for dealerships to actually staff on the messaging and on the chat platforms with their own team members to really facilitate a more engaging environment and get the consumer to communicate more effectively with the dealership. So if you haven't thought about that beforehand, start taking a look at the volume of chat traffic, because when we use third parties to engage with our guests, unfortunately, we miss the gross amount of chats that started. We just see the net effect if it turned into a lead. What we want to do is to spend more time studying the metrics around how many text communications and how many chat communications occurred, so that we can start considering building our own team to support that. So we also have to be mindful that the consumers are buying at a rate that's different than what we're doing at the dealership. In fact, through our own studies, we've found that about 24% of the consumers who buy a vehicle after shopping online do it in the first 10 days. So a lot of dealerships really have predispositioned themselves to really just do a good job early and not do a good job as the lead ages. 43% buy within 30 days, but what that tells you is 57% will not buy within the first 30 days. And further, 32% take more than 90 days to buy. Now, when you measure that against the lead follow-up habits in most dealerships, the average salesperson follows up on the lead for a whopping 3 days. So what we've got to do at our dealerships is we've got to be patient and persuasive if we hope and expect to be able to wow that customer over time. So the other thing when we talk about digital retailing is what shoppers are interested in. In fact, in the same Google study, 74% of Canadian auto intenders would use an online purchase option. The other part of that is they buy vehicles sooner if there was an online purchase option. So when you think in terms of that, most dealerships before COVID didn't even have the opportunity for them to do online purchasing. And to be fair, most dealerships had it in a scattershot approach. You could look at inventory, you could get your car appraised, you could check on financing, you could even apply for financing. There just wasn't a real streamlined approach. So we've got about 32 providers in the marketplace right now that all think they have the greatest approach. What you'll have to do is make that decision on your own at your dealership, what you want to do. But ultimately, what we want to do is to just make it easy for the guest and make it easy for your team. So I'm going to show a video of the largest Toyota dealership in the US and their proposition to the consumer when it comes to buying online through their digital retailing tool.
Shopping for a new car? Welcome to Express Car Buying. With our Express store, you can search all cars in our inventory or configure your dream car and we'll find it for you. Get our best pricing up front without the hassle. Select payment options for cash, finance, or lease transactions. Get an instant cash offer for your trade-in. No need to visit the dealership. Research and select recommended service and protection plans. Have a question? No problem. Your concierge will be there for you every step of the way. Complete the entire transaction from the comfort of your home in a matter of minutes. Pick up your vehicle at the dealership or have it delivered to you. Your car will be prepped and ready to go, in and out in less than 30 minutes. That's it. It's that easy. Instant pricing and express checkout. Enjoy Express Car Buying. Start shopping our Express store today.
I don't know about y'all, but I've been in the auto industry for a long time. This is my 40th year. My family's been in the car business my whole life, essentially. And what's amazing is if I'm working at a dealership and I'm the sales manager, I love this. I just think it would be spectacular to come in early in the morning to start the new day, get my cup of coffee and walk past the sales desk and they say, oh, by the way, 3 people sold themselves a vehicle last night. All we have to do is to get them ready. So when we have the technology and the availability, what we're finding is we can't just build it and expect that the consumer is going to find it and go through it. We've got to use it for engagement. So when we reach out to a guest, one of the things we've got to do is to make sure that we understand what they're looking for and exceed their expectations. Because when we have express opportunities, sometimes we don't share that with the guests. So when we're doing lead response activities, what we're finding with dealerships that have digital retailing tools is if we'll send the guest the opportunity for them to go through the express purchase process, they'll spend more time and they'll be more loyal to the dealership than they would be normally, because they would start to go back to Google and start to look for more information. We just want to give them something from our store to our digital retailing platform so that they'll want to engage with us. So additionally, as you study more of the Google survey, 66% of consumers in Canada view digital experiences as good alternatives to a dealership visit. They love at-home test drives, they love videos, the online configurator, the digital showroom, but on growth through the COVID crisis is video conferencing. And we didn't expect that that would blow up the way it did. You take, for example, Zoom meetings, and the value of Zoom as a company has grown dramatically. In fact, I heard the other day that Zoom's value was greater than General Motors and Ford Motor Company, which sounds outlandish. But at the same point, this kind of technology is becoming so pervasive and so instructive into the future. I think what we've got to do is to be really paying attention to how consumers are thinking about this. And the physical visit to the dealership is not necessarily top on their agenda list. So on your own website, the new buying experience is becoming the new normal. And consumers are willingly giving information, and we're starting to see more and more websites have the expectation for the consumer that they can actually proceed to checkout and buy the vehicle. And although it might be odd in September of 2020, by September of 2021, while we've matured our processes internally and digital retailing tools have become more experienced and we've studied consumers' click behavior, I think we're going to see this become more and more the normal. And if you don't have it now, you'll certainly want to consider that into the future. And you know, it's almost there. I mean, we've bought books for years online. You know, eyeglasses. I use a company called Warby Parker, and I was able to give myself an online eye test, something I never ever would have expected that I was able to do. I was able to literally put frames on my face and take pictures so that I could see what that would look like. And it was as good as though I was standing there in the store. And we also are seeing more and more comfort around buying homes. So if consumers are willing to purchase homes online, it's pretty natural that the vehicle is becoming more and more the norm. The only issue becomes completing the paperwork. And as Eugene pointed out, that's where there's a lot of fear of fraudulent behavior, and dealers need to be hyper on guard for that. So as we build trust through transparency, we have to understand that shoppers learn almost everything online. And no longer can we just say to the guest, thanks for your interest in the vehicle. When can you come in? Well, what's the benefit? And we've got to decide if they do come in, what are we going to do that's better than what they have running in their mind? We've got to take out the old movie and put in a new movie that really lets them know if you've gathered the price, you've got the trade value, you know about a reputation, you've got the vehicle history and specs and such, we're going to make it easy for you. And we're starting to see dealerships that are now timing how long it typically takes for someone to come in. And through COVID in particular, where guests had to make appointments, and when they showed up, they didn't want to hang out for risk of transacting, the COVID virus. What we wanted to do was to make it really quick and easy. So we're asking the dealerships that we work with at the very base level, just start measuring from the time they get out of their vehicle to the time they leave, either without purchasing or by purchasing, and see how long it takes. And then start trying to compress that buying time so that the consumer gets a great experience online and they are met with an equally great experience at the dealership. Unfortunately, even after the guest has shopped online, most dealers make them start all over when they reach out to them. So we have to teach dealership team members how to read the lead, how to understand what the customer's expectations are, and then just truly concentrate on making it as easy as possible for them to go ahead and transact going forward. And if we identify where they are in the shopping process, instead of making them start over, we can help them from there. So most digital retailing tools, part of the confusion with them is we get a lead when they fill out the initial form, then we get a lead when they pick inventory, and then we get a lead when they put a trade value in, and then we get a lead when they finish financing. And sometimes people don't do anything more than just start at the beginning. So what we've got to do is understand where they are and learn why they're there, review the specifications of what they were interested in, do what we should normally do, which is a check availability and alternatives, because as people buy more and more vehicles online, we're going to have sold inventory and not have that available for them. Definitely got to make price transparent and part of the friendship that we build with them. And of course, be able to review their trade values and even talk about financing without fear that we're jeopardizing the experience at the dealership. That's why we love video conferencing, because a video appointment where we can use a Zoom or some other tool to get on the physical page with the guest makes all the difference in the world. And then we've got to communicate on a personal level. Yes, we are using technology to engage the guest on the website, but we've got to recognize that despite the fact that they find the websites attractive and helpful, they're still looking for a human interaction to build trust. So the more personalized the communications can be, the better off it's going to be. And make sure that we get across to the guests that I can help you find just the right vehicle, because that's where our expertise comes in. Our knowledge of the products, our knowledge of financing and trade values really are a friend to the guest. And we've got to make sure that the guest understands that we're comfortable with the technology as much as they are. And if you're operating a sales team where you've got the old dogs that are resentful of learning new tricks, I think it's time to have a counseling session with the old veterans and say, this is not going away. Consumers are finding this more and more attractive, and start bringing them up to speed and start, instead of always worrying about, let me replace the old veterans that are grumpy and not so technically oriented, we've got to take the time to prepare them for the future so that we can leverage their veteran experience and their product knowledge expertise and meld that with the technology available. Most veterans, once they cross the bridge and understand the technology and what it can do for them, really shine when it comes to digital selling. And understanding that your process is essentially your why buy here. And whether it's just the process on the website, but when you combine that with a great process at the dealership and you can brag about it, much like that Longo Toyota express purchase strategy, that's why customers will want to buy from you, because you made it so easy. So a lot of customers still want to visit the dealership, even if they do the deal online. And we've got to make sure that we meet them wherever they want to work the deal, whether it's at their home or at their workplace or at the dealership, and recognize that building a visit to the dealership as a good visit is really important. So we beat the drum loudly on a VIP appointment process. What we're finding is consumers who go to a dealership that has a really strong VIP appointment process typically buy at a rate of 70%. Typical visits to the dealership, we see close rates in the 40 to 50% range, but we see tremendous boost when a dealership is able to move it to that next level. Here's an example of a dealership that does have a video that they use to describe their process.
Our streamlined VIP process at Gale Toyota saves you valuable time. Your test drive was scheduled online, and you're greeted at the dealership by friendly Gale representatives with your vehicle clean and ready to go. Your price has been locked in, so there's no haggling and no hassle.
So when you're able to provide that kind of experience to the guest, it's something we've got to build into our messaging. Additionally, on our website, if we've got the ability for the guests to buy at home, fast, easy, and secure, we want to make sure it's secure for them so that they feel more inclined to want to engage with it. Because as Eugene pointed out with cybercrime the way it is, as we're gathering financial information, we want to make sure that they can trust what our systems are able to provide. And of course, if the guest still doesn't want to come in, I can't emphasize enough the benefit of co-navigating and leveraging some sort of a meeting technology to work the deal with the guest from a remote standpoint. So just some key takeaways. We know consumers love to shop online, and we have to take these digital field trips. We have to put ourselves in the seat of the guest while they're shopping online. And our role is we've got to make it easy for them and not just try to sell them a vehicle, but help them with the process, walk them through that, do that co-navigating that I talked about. And each of you can do something to improve your consumer experience. Every product advisor can make a difference. So it doesn't have to wait for the dealership to create new processes or anything that's real extravagant. You can do this one-on-one and make it all about your guest and the way you take care of them. And of course, managers must drive the process, and they have to expect results, because if in fact they're involved in it, we're going to get much better results. So with that, I'll turn it back over and be open for any kind of questions that might come up. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, David. So I'll jump in. The way the question and answer period will work is that I will ask you one or two questions, and I'll switch to Eugene, and we'll go back and forth that way. David, you're up first, and I guess one of the first questions I'll have is, what percentage of people are doing the whole deal online? So you mentioned a lot about online and the importance of digital, but what percentage, maybe either US, Canada, or North America, if you have the numbers, are doing the whole deal online?
I don't think this will surprise you. There physically is not a way to do everything completely online. I had a work colleague that bought a Tesla, and everything was done online, except when he went in to do the paperwork, in the showroom, they opened up the vehicle for him. There was an envelope with some forms that he had to sign for the state of Illinois. So even then, when he did everything online, agreed to the price, agreed to financing, they still had to have a wet signature, even though they'd signed the finance documents online. The state still required that. So at some point in time, when we can get away from that and that becomes real digital, then we can start doing 100%. But what we typically see is, Karina, about 3 to 5% are transacted online. More would if dealerships really had the process pinned down in the dealership to allow them to do it. So still a really small percentage. Probably you could say in North America, 0 can really do it all without some sort of a wet signature. But in so many ways, we're ever so close. And I think 2020 is going to blow the lid off of that. Dealers are really excited about the opportunity. They seem to appreciate the technology. The other byproduct is gross averages are actually really strong, and consumers are selling themselves extended service plans, paint protection, and other variables that were concerns from a profit standpoint for dealers. But digital retailing technologies actually are finding that consumers self-select and sell themselves things that we were afraid required a human interaction to cause them to buy it.
Well, that's interesting because so consumers clearly have a big interest, and we've seen that already since COVID-19 started in various research, survey, whatever has been online. Now, I did speak to a lot of dealers in the early days of the pandemic, and even in the middle of it. I interviewed a lot of them. And I had some dealers tell me that they didn't see a vast improvement in their investment in digital during the pandemic. Now, remember, this isn't within the first 3 months of it, while others actually did notice a significant improvement. So my question for you is, where can they find that balance? What would you say to the dealers that didn't see a big enough improvement to justify investing in digital retail?
Yeah, so my advice would be, rather than invest in digital retailing as a tool or a platform, I would really streamline their website. If you go to the average dealership website today, just on the homepage, there's like 40 buttons. Consumers, if they go to your mobile device, if we would design our physical desktop and laptop configured websites based on mobile, we'd have like 4 or 5 buttons. And to equate it to going to the dealership, I would never walk out onto the lot and say, Karina, welcome to our dealership. I've got about 40 questions I want to throw at you before we go forward. So Google Analytics will support this, and own website analytics will support it as well. Consumers want to see your new inventory, your used inventory, schedule service, or perhaps ask a question. They don't want to get into all that other stuff. So there's a wonderful book that I read years ago, and they've done different editions. So if you decide to do it, and I wouldn't recommend anybody buy it, just remember the title. The title of the book is called Don't Make Me Think. And if you would redesign your website and get rid of all the crazy words that we use and all of the different approaches, and we just made them so simple. A good example of that would be Google. If you go to google.com, you literally can search. Gets rid of all the clutter. But if you go to Yahoo, or if you go to Bing, there's so many distractions, you kind of lose focus of what you really started for by the time you see a news alert or some entertainment story that popped up. But when you go to Google, you just search. Design your website with Google in mind, and you're going to get better benefits. So I would start there. And then if you're doing a good job by streamlining how they find your inventory, how they evaluate their vehicle, how they can apply for financing, you literally can do a workaround and create your own digital retailing tool with no additional expense. And then if they do still want to go with a digital retailing tool, start with one that allows a lot of engagement. because consumers aren't necessarily ready to sell themselves a vehicle. So try to get one to where you can interact via chat and messaging throughout the process so that they are guided forward. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Thank you. On to Eugene. I see we have a question that you answered from André Lapointe, which is how do you get your security? And I see he just wrote posture assessed. So I want to make sure I'm asking that correctly. And you did answer it, but you had mentioned you'd like to make this a little more, you'd like to answer it for everybody. So Eugene.
Yeah. So when we talk about a security posture assessment, we're really talking about how your organization, how resilient would it be to a cyber attack? And so like anything, if somebody tells you to renovate your house, there's a huge difference in scope, but you can kind of start small if you haven't done something before, something as simple as a vulnerability scan, which would be relatively inexpensive. If you think you're relatively mature, you can go up to a full-fledged, we call it a red team or offensive security test, where we'll do the dark web scans. We'll try to log on to your webmail systems using those stolen credentials. We'll try to do password stuffing. We'll try to break into your other systems and see how far we can get, so we can see how well secured your IT systems are.
Perfect, thank you. And so I'm also going to jump onto another question now. David mentioned teleconferencing platforms a lot, and so that's been mentioned by a lot of dealers I've spoken to, and many companies. Obviously, it's quite popular. So businesses are more often using these platforms due to the pandemic, things like Google Meet, Zoom, Skype, Teams, and so on. Are there any particular platforms that dealers should avoid, and if so, why?
I don't think so. I mean, the only thing I can tell you is the whole kind of web conferencing piece is pretty much the same. You know, don't click on links, don't open attachments from people you don't know, you know, create a password, create a lobby for people before you let them enter, like all that kind of Zoom bombing security. What we're finding is some organizations are being targeted by cyber criminals where they'll say, hey, I'm calling from IT. I need you to run this remote control tool so we can kind of take control of your screen. So what I would say is, you know, all those popular ones that people are using are fine. You don't just use best practices, but just be wary about some of those remote control tools that are out there.
All right, well, actually, if anybody has any questions, now is a great time to put your question in the Q&A button below on the screen. If you can't see it, just hover your mouse over it, and I'll continue with the questions. So David, do you have a recommended tool that dealers should consider for digital retailing? I mean, you mentioned the website and what dealers can do for that, but as a tool itself, like, is there anything specific they should be targeting?
Yeah, rather than recommend a tool, let's recommend some elements of a tool that I think would be good. Fortunately, I've been doing this for 17 years. Not digital retailing, but just giving this kind of advice, and because our company won't accept any kind of all these companies want to commission you, and they say recommend our company and we'll give you money, and I'm like, look, our dealers are the ones that are needing the advice, and we want to be impartial and unbiased. So the most impartial approach that I would say is look for a tool that is easy for the consumer to use first and foremost, and take your friends, neighbors, employees, people who don't know about buying a vehicle through the different offerings, and make sure that it's logical for them. I worked for a company one time, and we did consumer testing, and it was a user experience, and the guy who designed the website says, oh, this is great, we're going to go to Austin, Texas, and we're going to have these consumers come in, and they're going to navigate the website. We've done a great job, so they're going to, you know, love the website. he was pouring sweat before we were done because nobody knew how to navigate the website. It was his single most professional or embarrassing moment as a professional. So we buy cars all the time, so we're not the ones, or we're in the car business, so we're not the ones to do it. Take people who are occasional buyers every 3 or 4 years, give them an experience, go find the cheapest SUV, go get your trade appraised, go apply for financing and see how logical it is. Ask a question. Make sure that we've got that interactive capability. I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't want a digital retailing tool that only took the finished product. Sometimes people have a question throughout the product or throughout the process, and I want to be able to engage them and lighten their load as they go through. And that's why we see a lot of digital retailing tools just chunk data. So, the customer's interested in this vehicle. Here's a chunk of data. Well, on the BDC side, I'm responding to that lead, but the guest is appraising their vehicle and maybe applying for financing. So we're reaching out to them too early. So look for tools that integrate naturally into your process. Don't just go for the most glamorous tool, go for the most simple and the one that allows you to engage very easily with the guest. So that's my advice on that.
Great, thanks. Well, so more research required, but that's fine what they're really looking for. Eugene, you're up next. My question for you is, are you able to tell me what the correlation between social distancing measures and cyber threats and attacks are? As in, what do dealers need to be cautious about?
We covered most of that in the presentation. It's just really around kind of the KYC, right? The know your customer, know who you're talking to, validate the stuff that's coming through, even email. It's very easy to, when we look at people that are registering domains that are very similar, there are services out there that can monitor for that type of behavior, but at the end of the day, it looks very similar. So just be aware, because you can't validate just with somebody coming in and getting a wet signature on a New Hampshire state registration. You just have to be cautious.
Perfect. And David, my last question for you then, and then the last question for Eugene will follow. David, what advice would you offer to dealers preparing for, or rather anticipating, a potential second wave of COVID-19?
Get very good at your digital processes. I really want to emphasize that your process is your why buy. And if you really get your team engaged and take them on digital field trips, let them understand what that customer experience and expectations are online. I read an article recently that said customers have the expectation of their last good experience for their next experience. So for example, everybody has great acclaim from Amazon. So if we're comfortable with Amazon and we hold them and their standards to what we would expect going forward, yes, I want to be able to find things easy. I want to be able to interact with someone. I want to give reassurance with reviews, and I want to be able to be on and off in moments as opposed to dedicating half a day to something. I think that's really what a dealership needs to do, is to look through the eyes of the consumer and be prepared for all of their team members to do it. And so a lot of dealers will subset and have a BDC or business development team become experts at communicating and working with digital customers. I think that's crazy. I think dealers need to get their whole sales team, their whole service team, and everyone involved in consumer facing roles to understand what the expectations are of the consumers are, and be able to deliver on that with their communications and with all of the interactions that they have.
Thank you, David. So a good amount of prep work, but it seems that that second wave is becoming more and more.
Yeah.
Eugene, my final question for you is, what are some simple fraud or cybersecurity threat measures that dealers can implement today or we'll say within a short period of time, including tactics to ensure their information does not appear on the dark web. So you did cover a bit of this, but I thought maybe you can kind of address this a little more thoroughly, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, the information that's out there, it's already there. There's nothing you can do about it. You know, once it's on the internet, it's there for perpetuity. So, you know, really to the point earlier is change your passwords, don't reuse them. From a business process, that's kind of the easy win. I mean, David talked about it from a digital buying perspective, but it's the same thing on fraud prevention. You know, before a transfer of over, I don't know, whatever $1,000 is made, make sure you get, you know, confirmation through either in person or through a phone call to the individual that you know is trustworthy, and before that transfer takes place. So there are some low cost things if you think about it to prevent that fraud from happening.
Great, thank you very much. And so those are all the questions I have. I see nobody has added any more questions. So with that, if you have any more questions, you can always reach out to us and we'll send them to the experts. Otherwise, thank you very much to both of you for taking the time to do this webinar. Really great information, and thanks to participants for taking the time to join.
Thank you, Karina. Bye now.
And I'll pass it along to Alex.